A woman came into my neurology clinic a few years ago, convinced she had Alzheimer's. She was 71, sharp as a tack, and she had spent 3 months quietly terrified because she kept forgetting where she put her reading glasses. She had stopped telling her daughter. She stopped calling her friends as much. She was just waiting for things to get worse. She did not have Alzheimer's. What she had was anxiety, a vitamin deficiency, and 4 months of poor sleep. We treated those things. She walked out of that clinic a different person. But here is the part that stays with me. 3 months after I saw her, her neighbor's son called our office. His father, 74 years old, had been doing something that the whole family had quietly started explaining away. He had been getting lost driving home from the hardware store he had gone to every Saturday for 20 years. He had paid the same electric bill 3 times.
Time to get these squared away.
He had started snapping at his wife over things that would never have bothered him before. The family called it stress. They called it retirement adjustment. They called it getting older. He had early Alzheimer's. Those two cases sit next to each other in my mind because they represent the two mistakes I see families make over and over again. The first is panicking too soon, mistaking normal aging for something it isn't. The second is waiting too long, explaining away real warning signs because nobody taught them what to look for. Both mistakes cost you. The first one cost you peace of mind. The second one costs you time, and in early Alzheimer's, time is the one thing that matters most. So today, I want to give you a different tool, not a list of vague symptoms to worry about, a clear way to tell the difference. At the kitchen table, in a real conversation, in everyday life. We are going to go through 5 specific warning signs, and I want to tell you right now, Sign 4 is the one that almost every family misses. Not because it is rare, because it does not look like a brain problem at all. I have sat across from thousands of patients in my neurology clinic. The ones who do best, the ones who have real options, are the ones who knew what to look for before things became serious. That is what I want for you today. Before we get into the 5 signs, I need to give you something that will make everything else make sense. Because the single biggest source of confusion I see, for patients, for families, for adult children watching a parent age, is this. They do not know where normal aging ends and something more serious begins. So let me give you a simple way to think about it. Normal aging is your brain working a little more slowly. Think of it like a car with more miles on it. The engine still runs. It gets you where you need to go. It just takes a little longer to warm up. You might forget a name, and then it comes back to you in the shower. You might lose your keys, retrace your steps, and find them on the counter where you left them. The system is intact. It is just slower. Alzheimer's is something different. It is not the car slowing down, it is damage to the road itself. The part of the brain that gets hit earliest and hardest is called the hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus as your brain's filing clerk, the one whose job is to take new experiences and file them properly into long-term memory. In normal aging, that clerk works a little slower. In early Alzheimer's, the clerk starts misfiling things. Whole folders go missing, and eventually, the clerk stops showing up at all. Here is the clinical distinction that matters most. Normal aging lapses are self-correcting. The name comes back. You find the keys. The information was stored. It just took a moment to retrieve. Alzheimer's warning signs are persistent. They worsen over time, and they start to chip away at independence. The information was never properly stored. so there is nothing to retrieve. Now, here is something I want you to hold on to, because this is the piece that most people, including many doctors, do not talk about enough. Behavioral and personality changes can actually appear before memory loss does. There is a clinical concept called mild behavioral impairment, and research shows that persistent new shifts in mood, motivation, and personality can precede memory symptoms by months, sometimes years. This is not a fringe idea. It is increasingly recognized as an early warning window, which is exactly why the 5 signs we are about to cover are not all about memory. Some of them have nothing to do with memory, and that is what makes them so easy to miss. For each one, I am going to tell you 3 things: what it actually looks like in daily life, specific enough that you will recognize it if you see it, why it is happening in the brain, in plain language, and exactly what you should do if you see it. Let us start with the sign that most people file away as a bad day, and keep filing away for months. Warning sign number 1, the broken sequence. Picture this. Your mother has made her chicken soup the same way for 40 years. Same pot, same order, same timing. She does not need the recipe card. Her hands know what to do before her brain even finishes the thought. It is as automatic as breathing. Then one afternoon, you walk into the kitchen and something is off. The broth is burning on the stove. The vegetables are sitting on the counter uncut. She is standing in the middle of the kitchen looking uncertain. Not panicked, just lost. She knows she was making soup. She knows what soup is. But somewhere between starting and finishing, the sequence collapsed. She did not forget how to cook. She lost the order. This is warning sign 1, and I call it the broken sequence. It is not about forgetting a step because you got distracted. It is about a deeply familiar task, something done hundreds or thousands of times, suddenly falling apart at the level of organization. The what is still there. The when and in what order simply stops working. Here is how I help families tell the difference from normal aging. A normal aging moment looks like this. You go to the pantry for the salt, get distracted by something else, and come back wondering what you were doing. You figure it out. The system recovers. A broken sequence looks different. The person does not recover mid-task. They abandon it. Or they complete part of it in the wrong order and do not notice. The eggs go in before the pan is hot. The bill gets paid twice because the tracking step never happened. The stove gets left on not out of distraction, but because the step that says, "Turn it off now," simply did not register. Why does this happen in the brain? The ability to plan and sequence a task lives primarily in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain I think of as the traffic controller. It decides what happens in what order. It keeps track of where you are in a process and tells you what comes next. In early Alzheimer's, amyloid plaques begin to accumulate in and around these regions silently, sometimes years before a formal diagnosis. When the traffic controller starts going offline, multi-step tasks break down first, because they are the ones that require the most active coordination. And here is the piece that makes this sign so easy to dismiss. Families almost always have an explanation ready. She has been under a lot of stress. He did not sleep well. It happens to everyone sometimes. And they are not entirely wrong. Stress and poor sleep can genuinely mimic this. But there is a critical difference. Stress-related lapses resolve with rest. They are inconsistent. They come and go. The broken sequence I am describing is persistent. It happens across different tasks, on different days, even when the person is rested and calm. That pattern is what matters. What I also want you to notice is the emotional picture around this sign. Many people experiencing it are aware that something went wrong, even if they cannot explain it. They become quieter about cooking, about managing household tasks, about handling things they used to handle without thinking. They may hand things off or step back from responsibilities in ways that look like preference, but are actually avoidance. Watch for that. Now, here is your doctor's note. What to actually do if you see this. Start a simple log. A notebook, a phone note, anything. When you notice this happening, write down the date, what the task was, and what specifically broke down. Did they stop mid-task? Complete steps out of order? Repeat a step they had already done? 3 or more documented examples give a physician something real to work with. Vague concern gets a vague response. Specific examples get a referral. When you see your primary care doctor, do not just say, "She seems forgetful." Say, "I have noticed specific difficulty completing familiar multi-step tasks, and I have written down 3 examples. I would like a formal cognitive screening referral." That language triggers a different clinical response. Now, the next sign lives in something almost everyone does every day: conversation. And there is a very specific pattern hiding inside it that most people never think to notice. Warning sign number 2, the vocabulary void. Everyone has had this moment. You are mid-sentence and a word just disappears. It is right there, you can almost feel it, and then it comes back 30 seconds later while you are doing something else entirely. That is normal. That happens to people in their 30s and 40s too. That is not what I am talking about. What I am talking about is a pattern. Not a moment, a pattern. Here is what it looks like at the dinner table. Your father is telling a story he has told a dozen times. Except this time, halfway through, he stops. He reaches for a word and it is not there. So he works around it. He calls the remote control the thing for the television. He refers to his cardiologist as the heart doctor I see downtown. He describes his reading glasses as what I use to see small print. You fill it in for him and the conversation moves on, and no one mentions it. But it keeps happening. Not once a week, multiple times in a single conversation. And the words he cannot find are not obscure words. They are words he has used his entire life. That is warning sign 2, the vocabulary void. The critical distinction here is not whether it happens. It is the frequency, the pattern, and what happens when you try to help. With normal aging, a tip of the tongue moment resolves. You offer a prompt, they say yes, that's it, and they are back on track. With this warning sign, prompting often does not help. The word is genuinely inaccessible, and the substitutions become a habit. Vague placeholders like, that thing, you know what I mean, and the stuff start appearing where specific nouns used to live. Now let me explain what is happening in the brain, because this is not a language problem in the way we usually think about it. Think of your brain's language system like a large library. The books, the actual words, the concepts are still there. They have not been destroyed. But the catalog system that tells you where to find them is breaking down. The synaptic connections between your memory centers and your speech centers are flickering. You know what you want to say. The idea is completely intact. But the bridge between the idea and the word is corroding. So you know what the refrigerator is. You can describe it perfectly. You just cannot call it by its name. This is why the substitution pattern matters so much diagnostically. The person is not confused. Their thinking is intact. They are compensating in real time for a retrieval system that is starting to fail them. There is an emotional cost to this that families often miss entirely. Many people experiencing this sign begin quietly withdrawing from social situations long before anyone realizes why. They stop calling. They speak less in group settings. They let others carry the conversation. They avoid telling stories because they are afraid of getting stuck mid-sentence and not being able to finish. That withdrawal looks like introversion or fatigue or just getting older. It is none of those things. It is someone trying to manage a problem they cannot yet name. There is also a closely related behavior worth watching for, and it happens for the same underlying reason. Telling the same story twice in one evening. Not because the person forgot they told it, but because the memory of the telling never got properly stored. The "already said this" tag never got attached. So the story feels new to them every time. Here is your doctor's note. When you notice this pattern, write down specific substitutions. The exact words they used in place of the word they lost. Bring those to the appointment. Ask the doctor specifically for a language and memory assessment, not just a general cognitive screen. There is an important difference, and the specific results matter for knowing what comes next. Now, the next sign is the one that gets misattributed most often, because it shows up in the body, not in conversation. Families spend money on new glasses. They buy grip mats for the bathroom. They never once think to look at the brain. Warning sign number 3, the spatial stumble. Let me tell you what this sign looks like before I tell you what it is. Your husband reaches for his coffee mug and his hand stops an inch short of it. He looks mildly confused for a second, adjusts, and picks it up. You both move on. A week later, he stumbles getting off the curb outside the pharmacy, a curb he has stepped off 100 times. He catches himself. You chalk it up to not paying attention. Then he comes in from the garage and mentions he had trouble parking, which is strange because he has been parking in that same spot for 15 years. And one evening, he gets turned around walking from the living room to the bathroom, in a house he has lived in for 2 decades. Each of those moments, on its own, sounds like nothing. Together, they are warning sign 3. I call it the spatial stumble. And the reason it gets missed so consistently is that it looks exactly like something else. It looks like eyesight going. It looks like the normal unsteadiness of getting older. It looks like distraction or tiredness. Families buy new glasses. They suggest being more careful on stairs. They blame it on the shoes. But here is what I need you to understand. This is not an eye problem. The eyes are seeing perfectly well. The problem is what the brain does with what the eyes report. Think of it this way. Imagine your brain has a built-in GPS combined with a ruler. That system, housed primarily in the parietal lobe, is responsible for telling you where your body is in space, how far away objects are, and how to navigate 3-dimensional space in real time. It is the system that tells your hand exactly how far to reach for that coffee cup. It is the system that tells your foot how high to lift for a particular curb. It is the system that orients you in a familiar room in the dark. In early Alzheimer's, amyloid disruption in the parietal region causes that GPS and ruler to start sending back wrong measurements. The hand reaches and stops short. The foot lifts the wrong amount. The familiar hallway suddenly feels uncertain. The brain is receiving the visual information. It is just misinterpreting the spatial data, getting the distances and depths slightly, consistently wrong. This is why the sign shows up first in precision tasks and in familiar environments. Reaching, parking, navigating known spaces at night. The tasks that used to run automatically on that spatial processing system start requiring conscious effort. And conscious effort is not enough to compensate for a system that is genuinely miscalibrating. There is a safety dimension here that I want to name directly. When someone who was previously sure-footed starts having unexplained stumbles, near misses around the house, or minor household accidents, bumping into door frames they previously cleared, misjudging the height of a step, spilling things they reach for, that is not just clumsiness. That is a neurological signal, and it carries real fall risk, which for someone in their 70s carries its own serious consequences. Getting disoriented in familiar places belongs in this same category. A senior who cannot find their way out of a grocery store they have shopped in for years, or who becomes genuinely confused navigating their own home at night, is showing a spatial processing breakdown. Not fatigue, not inattention, not age. Here is your doctor's note. If you are noticing stumbles, near misses with objects, or disorientation in familiar places, document it. When it happened, what the situation was, whether it resolved. Then when you see the doctor, use this specific language. I would like a neurological exam that includes visuospatial and spatial processing assessment. Not just a memory test. Spatial processing and memory are different systems, and you want both evaluated. Now we come to sign 4. The one I mentioned at the start. The one that lives closest to the surface, visible to everyone around the person, and still gets missed almost every time. Because it does not look like a brain problem. It looks like a relationship problem. Warning sign number 4, the emotional thermostat. Think about someone you know well, not their face, their temperament, the way they handle frustration, whether they are the kind of person who raises their voice or keeps things steady, whether they tear up easily or stay composed. You know that person. You have known them for years. Now imagine that person changes. Not dramatically, not all at once, but over a period of weeks or months, something is different. The man who was famously patient with his grandchildren now snaps at minor things. A door left open, a question asked at the wrong moment. The woman who was warm and trusting with her neighbors has started making comments about people taking advantage of her, suspicions that seem to come from nowhere. A husband who never cried now weeps during television commercials. A wife who was always steady now has reactions that feel outsized, disproportionate, hard to predict. The family tries to adjust. They walk on eggshells. They have conversations about stress. They wonder if something happened they don't know about. They blame it on pain, on loneliness, on the news. What they are actually seeing is warning sign 4, the emotional thermostat. Here is the distinction I need you to hold on to, because it is the one that separates a warning sign from just a personality. The key word is uncharacteristic. If someone has always been short-tempered, that is not a warning sign. That is who they are. If someone has always been suspicious or emotionally volatile, you are not seeing something new. But if this is a change, a real persistent departure from who that person has been for decades, that is what matters. New and lasting. That is the clinical flag. Now let me explain what is actually happening in the brain when this occurs. Your frontal lobe and the connections it maintains with the limbic system, the brain's emotional center, act as a kind of thermostat for your reactions. When something frustrating happens, that system steps in and moderates the response. It is the reason most of us do not scream at strangers in traffic. The thermostat regulates how much heat gets through. In early Alzheimer's, that regulatory circuit begins to break down. The thermostat stops working properly. So a small irritation, something that would normally produce mild annoyance, now produces an outsized reaction because the dampening system has failed. The emotional signal comes through full strength, with nothing moderating it on the way out. This is also the biology behind what is called mild behavioral impairment, or MBI. Research shows that persistent new behavioral changes, patterns that last 6 months or more, can actually precede memory loss by years in some people. This is not a fringe idea. It is an early warning window that most families never know exists. When I say behavioral changes can come before memory symptoms, I am not speaking loosely. I am describing a documented clinical pattern with a name and a growing body of research behind it. There is another form this sign takes that is even easier to miss because it is quiet rather than explosive. Apathy. A person who used to love their garden simply stops going outside. Someone who looked forward to their weekly card game stops calling to confirm. A grandmother who lived for her grandchildren's visits starts seeming indifferent when they arrive. No irritability, no outbursts. Just a slow withdrawal of interest and engagement from things that used to matter. Apathy is one of the most common and most overlooked early behavioral signs. It reads as depression. It reads as grief. It reads as someone simply slowing down with age. It is worth taking seriously. Here is why families miss both versions of this sign, because neither one looks like a brain problem. The explosive version looks like a relationship problem. The quiet version looks like sadness. So families spend months trying to communicate better, reducing conflict, offering more support, when what they are actually watching is early brain pathology presenting as personality. Here is your doctor's note. Write down specific incidents, dates, what happened, how it differs from how this person has always been. Note whether it has been going on for weeks or months. When you see the doctor, use this specific phrase, new personality change. Those 3 words flag a different clinical pathway than saying, she seems forgetful. They open a door that a memory complaint alone might not. There is one more sign to cover, and this is the one most people think they already understand. But there is a specific detail about how memory actually fails in early Alzheimer's that almost nobody talks about, and it changes everything about how you recognize it. Warning sign number 5, the retrace failure. Here is what most people think forgetting looks like in early Alzheimer's. They picture someone who cannot remember a name, or loses track of a conversation, or struggles to recall what they had for breakfast. And yes, those things happen. But there is a more specific pattern, one that is clinically significant and almost never explained clearly. And I want you to understand it precisely, because it is the difference between knowing something is wrong and being able to say exactly why. Let me give you 2 scenarios side by side. In the first one, you set your glasses down on the kitchen counter while you are unloading groceries. Later, you cannot find them. You retrace your steps. You think back through what you were doing. Kitchen, groceries, counter. You find them. The memory was there. You just needed to go back and pull it out. In the second scenario, you set your glasses down, and there is no memory to retrace. Not because you are confused, not because you were distracted, but because the act of setting them down was never stored in the first place. the save button did not press. So when you go looking, you are not searching for something that got misfiled. You are searching for something that was never filed at all. And you will find your glasses in the freezer, or in the bathroom cabinet, or somewhere that makes no logical sense, because the action happened, but the memory of it did not. That is the retrace failure. And that distinction, misfiled versus never stored, is the most important thing I can tell you about how Alzheimer's affects memory. The hippocampus, the filing clerk I described earlier, does one specific and critical job. It takes short-term experience and converts it into long-term memory. Think of it as your brain's save button. Every time something happens, a conversation, an action, a decision, the hippocampus is supposed to press that button and store it. In early Alzheimer's, the save button starts failing. Events happen, but they do not get recorded, so there is genuinely nothing to retrieve later. This is why the repeated question pattern is one of the most clinically specific behaviors I watch for. When someone asks the same question within minutes of receiving a clear answer, this is not inattention. It is not stubbornness. It is a storage failure. The answer came in. It just never got saved. So the question feels completely fresh to them every single time. They are not pretending not to remember. They genuinely do not. I want to name the emotional reality of this because it matters enormously for the people living alongside it. When you answer the same question for the third time in an hour and you respond with frustration, even mild frustration, you are responding to someone who has no idea they already asked. To them, this is the first time. Your frustration lands on them as something confusing and hurtful, and it often accelerates the social withdrawal that is already beginning. Understanding the mechanism does not make it easy, but it does change how you respond. There is also the item in the wrong place pattern, which follows the same logic. Keys in the freezer, the television remote in the sock drawer, a wallet in the fruit bowl. These locations are not random. They reflect the moment the action was interrupted by the save button failing. The item ended up wherever the hand was when the memory stopped recording. Here is your doctor's note. Over the next 2 weeks, keep a specific log. Note repeated questions. The exact question, how many times, how close together. Note any items found in genuinely illogical places. Bring that log to your doctor and ask specifically for a referral to a neuropsychologist for formal memory testing. Not just a brief in-office screen, a full evaluation. And ask about blood-based biomarker testing, which can now detect early Alzheimer's pathology before significant symptoms appear. That technology exists. You are allowed to ask for it. We have now covered all 5 signs. But knowing what to watch for is only half of what I want you to leave here with. The other half is knowing exactly what to do next. So let's talk about what comes next, because this is where I see people stall. They recognize something. They feel that quiet alarm, and then they do not know what to do with it. Start here. A brain health diary. A notebook, a phone note, anything. Date. Describe what happened. Note whether it resolved on its own. 3 or more documented examples give a doctor something to work with. If you walk in with vague concern, you get vague reassurance. If you walk in with a written log, you get a referral. Start with your primary care physician. Be specific. Do not say, "I'm worried about memory." Say, "I have documented examples of new behavioral changes, and I am asking for a formal cognitive screening referral." If you are dismissed, ask again. You are allowed to ask again. A proper early evaluation includes more than one short office test. It should include a neurological exam, blood work to rule out reversible causes, thyroid dysfunction, B12 deficiency, vitamin D, sleep disorders, medication side effects, and ideally a referral to a neuropsychologist for formal testing. Many things mimic early Alzheimer's and are completely treatable. That is exactly why early evaluation matters. Not every sign means Alzheimer's, but every sign deserves an answer. And for those of you watching because you are concerned about someone who is resistant, do not argue about memory. Frame it as a general health check. Bring your documentation. You are not overreacting by taking this seriously. Now, there is one more thing I want you to know before you close this video. And this is important. Everything I just walked you through, the signs, the documentation, the early evaluation, all of it depends on one biological process that most people are actively undermining every single night without knowing it. It is not a diet thing. It is not an exercise thing. It is something that happens while you are asleep. Or rather, something that fails to happen when your sleep goes wrong in a very specific way. Your brain has a waste clearance system. It only runs during sleep. And when it does not run properly, when sleep is disrupted in a particular pattern that turns out to be extremely common in people over 60, the very proteins that drive Alzheimer's pathology begin to accumulate faster. I made a video about this. The title is on your screen right now. If you have just spent time learning to recognize these 5 signs, this next video is not optional. Because it tells you about a factor that could be working against your brain every single night, quietly, invisibly, regardless of everything else you do right. The good news is that once you know what to look for, it is something you can actually address. But you have to know what the pattern looks like first. That video is right there. Watch it now, while this is still fresh. Your brain will thank you for not stopping here.